You found yourself on another episode of Locked On Bulls. Are the Chicago Bulls truly looking to trade up in the draft? And if they are, who's that target? We're also going to look at could the University of UConn look at Billy Donovan if they do indeed lose their coach to the Los Angeles Lakers? And what are the Chicago Bulls' free agent goals? We're going to get into all that and more on today's Locked On Bulls.
You are Locked On Bulls, your daily Chicago Bulls podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Bulls, member of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every single day. I'm Haize, host creator of Chicago Bulls Central, Chicago Bears Central YouTube pages and podcasts. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, Bulls fans, so let's go ahead and get into it. So I'm sure many Bulls fans have heard the rumors over the weekend that the Chicago Bulls are looking to trade up. This is the second time that we've heard that the Bulls are kind of weighing their options and potentially trading up for the draft. The target has changed. There's initially some talk around Donovan Clingan that the Bulls could be looking to trade up to get him. Then we heard about the draft day promise to Devin Carter. And now we're hearing that the Bulls could be looking to trade up to get Chicago prospect Matas Buzelis. While he is Lithuanian, much like Arturas Karnišovas, Matas Buzelis was born and raised in the city of Chicago. Not to say that that should matter as far as draft prospects or anything like that, but it kind of makes sense. We've also heard that the Chicago Bulls worked him out privately in Los Angeles when our ownership group was there, our front office was there. And Buzelis is the type of target that I do think is worth trading up. Most mocks have him going between 1 and 5 in most mock drafts. There are some that have him going a little bit lower than that, but most have him going around that area. And so this is the type of guy who has tons of upside. As a point forward, his off-ball defense is already extremely good. He has a great amount of feel for the game. He also can be a floor spacer. He was a really good three-point shooter in high school, shooting the ball over 40% from three-point range, but it fell off in the G League Unite, only shooting 27%. So, of course, that may be some cause for concern and things like that. But even outside of that, this is a guy who as a communicator on both the offense and defensive side. He's really good in the pick and roll game. He has tons of potential as a point forward type prospect in this league. And so this is the type of player that has the true upside that may be worth trading up for. He's 19 years old. He'll be 20 for the majority of his rookie campaign. And this would definitely change some things for the Chicago Bulls as far as getting a young, promising prospect. And I know that there's the thought process or a lot of the terminology of calling this draft a weak draft. Over on Chicago Bulls Central, actually spent some time debunking most of the drafts that were labeled as weak drafts that actually turned out a pretty nice amount of starters to star level players. The 2020 draft was looked at as the weakest draft in a handful of years, and it ended up being one of the deeper drafts as far as just quality players to come out of that draft. So, and that's not necessarily because it happened in the past, means that it's going to happen with this draft. But if your thought process and kind of, because you kept hearing that this is a weak draft, has made you wonder, okay, why should the Bulls or why are the Bulls looking to move up? It really depends on how they value the talent, and the high upside of a guy like Matas Buzelis could absolutely be worth trading up for if it hits. And that's what it gets down to in a draft where between the potential in players between like 5 down to 15 are all very, very similar as far as the ceiling of those players. It raises the question of, are the Bulls going to get this right? And that's nothing that I can answer here. Anybody who's pessimistic on the Bulls getting a draft selection correct, that's more than warranted. So I can understand that, right? And that's what this front office has earned by the way that the lack of execution in certain things. But if they're going to move up in a draft like this, they got to get it right. And outside of just this draft, their next few draft selections, the Bulls have to hit on. And so it raises the question on, okay, if the Bulls are going to trade up in this draft, what are they using to trade up? Right? We know that Zach LaVine is on the trade block, that the Bulls are motivated to try to move Zach LaVine before the start of the season. But from what we've heard, the value around Zach LaVine, it doesn't seem like the Bulls are going to get an additional pick in this year's draft with Zach LaVine or a high pick and trade up? And are they willing to move off the 11th? Is this a thing where the Bulls are looking to acquire another pick, or are they looking to package number 11 with some of their assets to move up in the draft? Now, the assets that they have to trade, really, Alex Caruso, right? DeMar DeRozan can't be traded at the draft. He can be signed and traded in free agency, but that can't happen at the draft. Same thing with like Torrey Craig, Andre Drummond, right? Are the Bulls looking to maybe move on from one of the young players they already have to move up in this draft? This is all speculation on my part, but what it comes down to it, if the Bulls are looking in, it was reported by ESPN that they're looking to move up if the price is right, in the right situations, right? So they're willing to take a risk, but a calculated risk. And so trying to judge what that risk may be, that's the difficult part. And we'll see. Overall, I'm glad that the Bulls are reviewing all options. That's what I can honestly say. And if they see a guy and a prospect in this draft that they truly think has some star level potential, I'm not mad at them being aggressive and going after it, but you got to hit on it. And especially if you're giving up assets, either present or future assets, to move up, you have to make sure that you're getting it right, in my opinion. And that's what it comes down to me, is that, okay, you want to move up, you've identified a talent, go out there and get it. But what's the price? Because especially when you're hearing a guy like who has a very similar ceiling to like a Busilis, it's Tajon Saloon, and he's starting to be mocked more and more to go to the Chicago Bulls, right? Nikola Topic, another player in this draft that, may be falling because of the ACL injury. So how does that change the trade market and values and things like that are all questions. But ultimately, it just comes down to, can the Bulls get it done, and will they make the right decision? And that is something that not a lot of people, Bulls fans, are going to have faith in, especially when you're pairing here in the week draft and things like that. And I think ultimately, when you look at Busilis is one specifically that I think is worth the Bulls trading up for. I really do. I think he has that high level. I know the stats in G League don't really stand out and scream at you or anything like that, but I wouldn't be mad if they actually get him. The playmaking, the upside, he's kind of the type of player where the game is going. He has, 6'9" with a 6'10", almost 11 wingspan that makes some sense there in the versatility. And then he's also a guy that, while an international player because he is Lithuanian, he's grown up here in Chicago. And so because of that, he may not have the learning curve that some of the more international prospects have in the American game. He also played in the G League Unite. So those are all things. I think this is a guy that, if the Bulls do get him, he could be their power forward of the future. Does that mean moving Patrick Williams to small forward long term? What does that mean for Dalen Terry, Julian Phillips? That's a story that we'll get to if the Bulls do that. And that's if they'll have to figure it out if that's what they decide to do. But ultimately, you got to get talent in here. The Bulls need an influx of talent. He comes in at potentially a position of need at finding a legit power forward type player. I know it's not a center where a lot of Bulls fans want to see the Bulls go. And the bigger question that I will have is, what does it cost to move up in a draft like this? And that is up for the Chicago Bulls to find out. I don't know. I would say that a lot of people aren't going to quite know what it would take to move up in a weaker draft. We've heard that a lot of teams aren't quite enamored with the talent in this draft, so they are willing to move out of this draft or move down. And especially with a lot of the prospects all having similar ceilings and caps, it can mean even more so. While a team could be willing to say, hey, yeah, maybe we pass on Mattis Busilis, but maybe we get another guy later on that we're actually higher on and we can gain some assets. I just hope that the Bulls aren't giving up a lot of assets. Imagine if the Bulls give up the number 11, give up Alex Caruso, and they draft at number 4, 3, whatever, and then the player that's taking that number 11 ends up being the better player out of that. Like, you can't keep getting decisions wrong. And for a front office that has overpaid a lot for what they've brought into this team, you cannot keep being on the wrong end of value and picks and things like that. So this is one of the drafts and situations where this Bulls team has to get this right. And whatever they do, if they get it right, ultimately, Bulls fans are going to be disappointed, I think, regardless of what we do in the draft. I think by the names and things like that are around, they're going to be a big portion of the fan base that's disappointed either way. And that's because this isn't a draft with the deep names. And do you want to really give up an Alex Caruso in a draft like this to move up? And I'm just using that as a name. Or would you rather kind of wait to the trade deadline and get a pick in the 2025 draft? Whereas even if you get a pick in the 20s in that draft, It's comparable to the talent going probably at number 10 in this draft. Well, that's a very deep draft, in 2025 and 26 are shaped up to be deep drafts. But that's what the Bulls have to find answers to. And we'll be reviewing it and talking about it here at Locked On Bulls every single day. So make sure you guys stay tuned in with us. But next up, we're going to be talking about UConn and their coach, Dan Hurley, potentially going to the Los Angeles Lakers. And could the UConn pivot towards Billy Donovan? We'll talk a little bit about that. I got to talk to you guys about one of our sponsors, and that is Gametime. Gametime makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. If you guys want to get tickets to the finals, I don't know if there's going to be available on Gametime, but hey, if you get there, go out and get it, right? You pick out any specific, games and matchups that you want, which could be the NBA finals, and hope that you get that. Priority last-minute deals save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. All-in pricing, toggling this feature allows the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, Bulls fans, with that said and done, let's go ahead and talk about the UConn situation. Now, it's been reported that the Los Angeles Lakers are prepared to offer the UConn head coach and Dan Hurley a massive contract offer to become their next head coach. And this is something that is a bit of a swerve in regards to the Los Angeles Lakers, who we heard initially could be going after JJ Redick. But if the Lakers are able to lock in Dan Hurley to a contract, could the UConn Huskies start pivoting towards looking at Billy Donovan? Now, we know that Kentucky, when they had an opening, they were reportedly interested in Billy Donovan. Billy Donovan kind of said that he wasn't looking to move on. He wanted to stay in the NBA. But could they make a pivot towards Billy Donovan? Anything's possible. I think that with Billy passing up on the Kentucky situation, it kind of already says and writes home that Billy ain't going nowhere. I don't think Billy is ready to leave the Chicago Bulls. I think he has a really good position with this team as far as he is locked in with ownership. He's locked in with the front office. They are very collaborative in that. What comes to that collaboration is a different mindset. But if for anyone looking and hoping that maybe this UConn position could offer the Chicago Bulls an opportunity to come off of Billy Donovan, I'm here to debunk it and tell y'all Billy Donovan ain't going nowhere. I refuse to believe. I would have to see the contract signed and inked before I believe in any stretch of the imagination that Billy Donovan is leaving the Chicago Bulls. I just don't think he is. We know that he has 2 years left on his contract here. On top of that, with Mark Eversley signing a 3-year extension, it seems like this front office is locked in. They're locked into this group. They're locked into this core. And I really don't think as well, not that it would matter. If UConn came and offered Billy Donovan a contract and he took it, they'd let him out of it. But I don't think that this front office looks to move on from Billy Donovan until they feel like they have the roster that is truly competitive and they feel confident in that roster. And then they say, hey, it can't be the roster at this point. It got to be the coach. Let's bring in a new coach. And so I think that as long as this roster is as flawed as what it is, as long as we have the issues that we do on it, I don't think Billy Donovan is going anywhere. When you look at the history, like I know AK came from Denver. There's always some questions on how much of his say was around Denver, but we're using that as a basis. They did not move on from Mike Malone when a lot of other teams would have, right? And so I know this is not probably what a lot of Bulls fans want to hear, but I think Billy Donovan's locked in here for Chicago almost as long as he wants to be here, with also the opportunity at some point that he may even move into the front office. And this has nothing to do with his son being hired by the Windy City Bulls. I don't think that would ever keep the team from moving on from Billy Donovan if they thought and felt it was time. I just don't think they're going to think and feel that for quite a while, if I'm being 100% honest. I would love to come here and always tell you guys what you want to hear. I would love to be able to say that. The problem is I got to be real with you guys. And that's not a problem, but that's what we're here to do, is always be honest, real in what we talk about and not try to sell you guys a dream. Unfortunately, I don't see it happening. I've seen some people ask the question. I've seen even a couple of articles, writing on the topic of if it's a possibility. I don't think that it is. And I think ultimately you got to ask yourself, and this is something that I asked over on Chicago Bulls Central as well, that I'm going to bring over here as a question. How much realistically has Billy Donovan held back or limited the ceiling of the Chicago Bulls, right? That's a question that as fans, we're going to always ask ourselves, right? When you see players go away like Daniel Gafford, when you see players go away like Derrick Jones Jr., who mainly was role and opportunity, and we have questions about player utilization here. Why do we play so small? Things like that. Playing Javonte out of position, playing Alex Caruso out of position. Some of that is, of course, built out necessity because of the roster construction, which isn't really on Billy Donovan. But outside of those aspect of things, until the front office, and AK once has said that he does not feel like this is the group that he'd feel comfortable going to ownership about and trying to sell them on paying the luxury tax. And I think that you can attach some of that same mindset when it comes to moving on from Billy Donovan. I don't think until this front office has a roster that they feel confident in asking to pay the luxury tax for, will they look to move on from Billy Donovan. If they feel comfortable, they say, hey, no, this is a roster that we feel 100% like it's worth paying the luxury tax. And if we're not getting to where we are and we feel that, that's when I think that we could see a coaching change, unless Billy Donovan steps down between now and then. But I think that we're locked in with Billy for quite a while. And unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at that, that's just what the situation is. There's going to be no quick fixes to get Billy Donovan out of here. It's just not going to happen. It's not. I know people have hopes and thoughts and all this. And, we've had that conversation as well here at Locked On Bulls. We've definitely have it because it is a conversation that, at times you need to have, right? But I just don't think and see the Bulls moving on from Billy Donovan anytime soon. That's my personal opinion. Could I be wrong on that? Absolutely. Could UConn say, hey, Billy, we're willing to offer you everything that you possibly could want, plus some more. To come to UConn, could Billy Donovan look at it and say, hey, rather than sit here and compete for 9 seeds, I want to go and compete for national championships at UConn? Weirder things have happened, right? I think the bigger thing to look at this is to say that with the Bulls record getting worse every year for the last 3 years, what else does it take? You see other teams around the league that don't settle for mediocrity. Hell, the Milwaukee Bucks moved on from a coach that had almost a 60% win percentage. So other teams around the league don't rest on their laurels. The Bulls in a lot of ways do, for continuity's sake or for whatever else we want to call it at that time. And as a fan base, it is frustrating. But I think ultimately it just comes down to they're content with Billy Donovan. And hopefully that contentment and stagnation doesn't end up being the undoing. But I mean, we first got to have a roster that we feel confident can do. And right now, I've said every coach in the NBA deserves the best roster possible, right? The most complete roster that you can put. There's no such thing as a perfect roster. The most complete roster that you can put together. And I just don't think the Bulls have had that. And I don't see a front office as level-headed and as committed to continuity as AK and Eversley have shown to move on from a coach in Billy Donovan that they still have confidence in. And I don't expect Bulls. I don't agree with it, right? But this isn't about agreeance. This is about understanding and recognition in a lot of ways. And I recognize where this front office is right now with this coaching staff and with this head coach, because we've revamped the coaching staff. So, that is what it is, but with the head coach. And so Billy Donovan's job is safe. It's going to be safe for another day. It's going to be safe for quite a while. And if anybody tells you, hey, Billy Donovan could potentially go to UConn, not to say that UConn may not be interested in Billy Donovan if Dan Hurley does leave, but I don't think that Billy Donovan is going anywhere anytime soon by any stretch of the imagination. But hey, maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe something crazy happens. I don't think so, but maybe it does. Well, with that said, we're going to wrap up the show by talking about the Bulls' kind of focus in free agency. What should their focus be in free agency? But before we do that, I got to talk to you guys about another one of our sponsors, and that is PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 5 million members. It is the most fun and exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more than or less than or 2 or more player stats for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. With PrizePicks, you can turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite sports. This summer, you can make a PrizePicks lineup in as little as 60 seconds. You just need to pick more than or less than 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're locked in. If you're looking for promotions, PrizePicks has got you covered every week. From lowering select player stat projections on Tuesdays, which increases your chance of getting a win, to getting your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Fridays. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. And especially while everything's going on, you got the WNBA going on, you got the NBA Finals going on, you got the NHL going on. Hey, get out there and if you listen, use PrizePicks. Go and do your projections. So that, again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. All right, Bulls fans, we're gonna go ahead and get ready to wrap up the show. Before we get ready to wrap up, what should the Bulls' goals be in free agency? And I bring this up because there's been a lot of articles on potential Bulls free agent targets from Buddy Hield, who I think is going to be on every single list you see for the Chicago Bulls this summer as far as free agent options between now and when he officially signs with a team. Buddy Hield is going to be on the list of potential targets for the Chicago Bulls. You have players like Jalen. You have other players. Kelly Oubre Jr. was one I've seen recently with him and his potential of being a scorer off the bench. Not really a consistent three-point shooter, but a scorer off the bench that could come in, provide some length, provide some defense. He had one of his best defensive seasons this past year. But the problem that with trying to gauge what the Bulls could do or should do in free agency right now is that we just don't know what the roster is going to look like. We don't know who the Bulls are shopping. We don't know what the Bulls are going to get back in the Zach LaVine trade. We don't know what the type of salary cap space the Chicago Bulls are going to have. So it's hard to really get that. And so ultimately, I want to talk about how the Bulls can even be players in free agency. We've talked a lot about the fact that the Bulls are right up against the luxury tax, but I think we need to add a little bit more perspective on that. The Bulls are right up against the luxury tax if they want to bring everything back. If they want to re-sign DeMar DeRozan, if they re-sign Patrick Williams with the $42 million and beneath the luxury tax they have, because contrary to what some Bulls fans think, the Bulls are always over the salary cap. But there's that space between the salary cap that you can still go over and the luxury tax. The Bulls don't pay the luxury tax. So the Bulls could have about $42 million beneath the luxury tax. But that would have to mean that either the Bulls don't re-sign DeMar DeRozan or they trade Zach LaVine and don't have to take all his salary back in matching, meaning that the team has some space to absorb some of Zach LaVine's contract. And I think ultimately the goal for the Chicago Bulls that we're going to talk about isn't necessarily talking about the player type they should go after. It's talking about how they could create that space to where they can even make any type of maneuvers in free agency. And that's where things are different. For the Bulls to become a player in free agency to use their mid-level exception. They also have their biannual exception available this year. But the mid-level is about $12.9 million. So to do that, the Bulls would have to do one of a few things. They would have to either not re-sign DeMar DeRozan, which would automatically give them that space below the luxury tax. They'd have to re-sign DeMar for less than the $40 million while also not re-signing Patrick Williams. Or they would have to do a combination of trading Zach LaVine, not taking back as much salary. Also, Torrey Craig opting out, Andre Drummond opting out, you not re-signing those guys. Those things all play a part. So the key thing isn't the Bulls creating this huge amount of cap space. It's them creating, after they re-sign whoever they want to keep, still having roughly $13 to $15 million in cap space beneath the luxury tax. If the Bulls can get to that point, that allows them to use their full mid-level exception. Trading Vooch could also do that, which I don't think is very likely without attaching major assets. So I think that's the goal for the Bulls. It's just to get yourself in a position to where you find a way to keep the players that you want, but also be able to add something to the team outside of just your draft pick this upcoming year. And that could be where the Bulls get a little crazy at. And that would, like I said, would mean trading on from Zach LaVine to one of these teams that has some cap space to absorb a portion of his contract to create a little bit of that, or not re-signing DeMar DeRozan, or a combination of both. If they really want to get a little frisky and surprise everybody, those are the options that ahead of them. But that's my time for today, guys. Make sure you can follow me at CEO Haize. You can also follow us at Locked On Bulls. We are free and available on every podcasting app and platform of your choice, as well as YouTube, the Odyssey app, Fire TV. We're everywhere. Go and support. If you're on the podcast side, go and check out the YouTube channel. Just hit the subscribe button to help us grow. If you're only on the YouTube side, go over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Leave us a review because you can't leave one on YouTube. But that's my time for today, guys. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Me and Pat will be back on Monday, y'all. Peace.